Oh man, it is good to be back here. It has been the better part of a year since I was last in here recording some new audio. I got real busy planning and designing things for my own wedding, and now I finally have some time to really start pumping these out. Feels good. I should probably note up at the top, there's really not going to be any gameplay footage in this video. This was a game I played back in January, which was way before I got my capture card set up. For both of my prior videos on Palworld and Banjo-Kazooie, I've gone back to the games after the fact and gathered this footage specifically for the videos. But with Jak II, why bother? I do not want to play another minute of this game more than I already had to. So let me lead off nice and strong and say I hate this game. You'll see it reflected in my final score, but just to sort of say off the top, I hate the open world, I hate the shooting, I hate the difficulty spikes, I hate most of the characters. This is not a game for me. Because I'm recording this so late after I originally beat the game, I can definitively say, of all the games that I played in 2024, this was my least favorite one that I beat. I watched Let's Plays and read walkthroughs and checked the Metacritic score, and everywhere I see nothing but glowing praise for this game, and I do not understand why. Also, it's time for the shameless plug portion of the video. Remember to like and ring that bell and subscribe. Leave a comment. Watch other videos. This is a call to action to do things that will help me grow my channel. But really, disingenuous shilling aside, it would actually be really cool if this video could get to other people, so please feel free to share it if you enjoy what I do. Alright, so let's get into this. Let's talk about Jak II. Finally, Jak II, that's Jak Roman numeral 2, not to be confused with its prequel, Jak and Daxter, or its sequel, Jak regular number 3, Jak II was released by Naughty Dog. That's the company that's also behind the Crash Bandicoot franchise, the Uncharted franchise, and The Last of Us, as well as their upcoming game. I think it's called Heretic something or other. We'll see what that one's like when it comes out. Jak II marks an interesting inflection point in Naughty Dog's development, where things decidedly shifted from a more platformer focus to a third-person shooter focus. In the original Jak and Daxter, you can still see a lot of holdovers from their Crash Bandicoot days. The original Jak and Daxter still showed a lot of signs of the original platformer that Naughty Dog was familiar with making before starting the Jak and Daxter trilogy. There's even nods to some classic Crash Bandicoot tropes, like the level where a boulder chases you and you're running towards the camera rather than it being behind you. And those touches are cute. Jak II, on the other hand, takes everything that Naughty Dog has originally known how to do and throws most of it out the window. I can only assume that Grand Theft Auto 3 probably came out a couple years before Jak II was made, because the influence on Jak II is undeniable. Despite Naughty Dog having no prior experience with an open world setup like GTA, the entirety of Jak II takes place in a Grand Theft Auto-like town. But there doesn't seem to be a point to it. It's just a giant empty hub that takes several minutes for you to cross in order for you to actually get to the next mission. I get that the original Jak and Daxter, they wanted to have these more expansive levels as a way of sort of iterating and moving past the original singular level design concepts presented in Crash Bandicoot, but this feels like a step too far in the other direction. Sure, there are townspeople and flying vehicles and guards to help set the oppressive authoritarian tone this city is going for, but even with these sorts of details, the whole area just feels lifeless. If you're just a good little citizen and you're not crashing into other people's vehicles constantly or running over the guards, then the act of going from mission to mission is nothing but a waste of time. Like, for as much of a non-fan as I am when it comes to Rockstar's output of games, we'll see if that changes as I play more of them, but at least there are things to do in its open world. I know, this is a radical concept apparently, but at least Grand Theft Auto has a plethora of minigames that you can choose to engage in or not. Most of the time I choose not to because they're not relevant to the main story and not required for completion. Like, Naughty Dog is a company that existed in the golden age for adding pointless minigames to pad content. This came after Banjo-Kazooie and Final Fantasy VII and a plethora of action platformers that would just include all sorts of random stuff that you could just do over and over for seemingly no reason. Even the original Jak and Daxter had like the fish catching minigame, from what I remember. I think you only did it a couple times to get precursor orbs and that was it, but I don't know why you couldn't just include something similar just for fun. Sure, there's racing and there's like a skate park. Both of those are in the same location, I think at the northern end of town. And then I think there's a place to turn in old precursor orbs to power up your character, and that's at the south end of town. So what the hell is in the entire middle section of this map? Nothing. Nothing but guards, townspeople, and vehicles. None of them go anywhere interesting. None of them do anything interesting. They're just walking a path or driving it. The world doesn't come off as some very well thought out thing, some decent incorporation of an inspiration source. It comes off as a cynical cash grab, just throwing in something that's part of another popular game at the time. It feels like it lacks purpose. It feels cynically like it's meant to do nothing more than pad this game out. Like if it takes another 5 to 10 minutes between every single mission in this game, somehow people will look at their final playtime and think that this was a worthwhile full price release. And what's more, this isn't aided by how terribly the vehicles control. They have what I can only describe as understeer while on ice, which is weird to say for a flying vehicle. From what I remember, I would have to time turns by clicking the stick all the way to the right well in advance of when I would actually want to turn, so that the weird understeer and ice physics and momentum can actually translate into the turn. I can't tell you how many missions relied on me getting from one point to another quickly, and how many times I was thwarted in doing so because the turning is so bad I would crash and lose the entire mission. I really don't think that this is just an honest skill issue. This isn't something that improved much in my entire time playing this game from start to finish. To this day, if I were to go back and play Jak II again, I would still be terrible with the vehicle controls. And given the wealth of experience that I have with other games, I really don't think this is a me issue. I think these vehicles just suck ass. The actual content of the story missions really just boils down to a handful of possible options. You're either traversing a landscape and dealing with enemies in it, killing specific enemies, escorting groups of NPCs through groups of enemies, or very occasionally, doing a minigame like the racing. And the fact that so many of these objectives are combat focused wouldn't be a bad thing if the combat was any good. There are a grand total of 3 guns in this game: a shotgun, essentially a pistol, and an assault rifle. That's it. Let's just completely ignore the fact that at the same time this is coming out, you have something like Ratchet and Clank, which is actually introducing interesting weapons. A lot of them really seem kind of childish in retrospect. Like, I think there's a gun that just like burps at people. There's stuff like the weird portable disco balls that compel enemies to dance instead of fight. And even if some of this seems kind of silly in retrospect, at least it's something. Jak II just doesn't care, is what it feels like. On top of the lack of variety or originality, the systems itself are just underdeveloped. This is a team that doesn't have a lot of experience with third-person shooters at this time. Interestingly enough, the rest of their catalog since Jak II has been very much focused on third-person shooting, but even in Uncharted 1, they really didn't know how to put together a competent third-person cover-based shooter yet. And so seeing this, basically their first crack at a third-person shooter system after doing nothing but relying on like a spin move that just approximates a combat system, it's Sad, honestly. I think the biggest offender with the combat is the lack of a proper lock-on system. As best I can remember, and from what I experienced playing, it really seems like there's essentially a version of aim assist, where if the weird laser sight from your gun just happens to be near an enemy, it'll just kind of vaguely shoot in their direction, but only if the enemy's on screen. There were so many times in my playthrough where I knew people were shooting me from behind, and I would swing around, shooting in a fan with my assault rifle, only to turn the camera and see every enemy still alive. I just wasted my ammo, essentially. And this, in turn, just makes all of the missions way harder than it feels like they should be. Like, I can remember some of the comments that I saw on these long play and walkthrough videos talking about how they like this Jak because it's the hardest one of the three. The thing is, I don't feel that that difficulty is earned. It feels like the difficulty is a product of faulty mechanics, not of purposeful design. There are a lot of different ways that you can put together difficulty. It can be very reaction-based, it can be memorization-based, it can be reliant on your own patience to actually see a task through to completion. But normally, we don't consider fighting against controls to be a valid form of difficulty. I'm sure there are some really interesting meta indie games that could turn something like this on its head, but that is not what Jak II set out to accomplish. Jak II sought out to be a bog-standard action platformer with guns set in a GTA city. It's also worth noting that I really didn't find the Dark Jak transformation to be especially useful in combat. When you activate this optional mode, it's supposed to feel like an old-school power-up. Like, for the next 60 seconds, you should just be this unstoppable killing machine. But what it does is completely restrict you from using guns, and there's no option to turn it off early. So let's say you get surrounded by enemies and you think, oh no, I should activate my Dark Jak mode so that I can take these guys out quickly. Well, you can do that, but then you might be stuck for 30 seconds with guys sniping you from long range, and you really can't do anything about it besides run up on them and try to dodge their bullets. I'll be honest, I really didn't use this power most of the time. It felt like more of a detriment than a bonus. Like, I'm pretty sure the original Devil May Cry games, which would have come out around the same time, still had the ability for you to turn off Devil Trigger early and conserve your energy for it. But in Jak II, it's all or nothing. You either have 100% dark power and can activate Dark Jak and will use it for its full duration, or you don't use it at all. And that makes it feel like a double-edged sword instead of a useful power-up to be used when needed and only when needed. So altogether, this makes it incredibly frustrating when you're given an escort mission and a single NPC dying means you have to restart the entire mission, and the entire way you are having to fight the lock-on system. You are having to fight the Dark Jak power-up, not the enemies, in order to succeed. You are fighting your own ammo limitations more than you are fighting these enemies. The true challenge of this game is not what was designed, it's what wasn't designed. Like, the enemy AI isn't even anything difficult to deal with. Most of the time they just stand still, shoot a couple times, maybe reposition, shoot again. Or if they're melee, all they do is just run up to you and try to melee attack you. And so you, in turn, shoot the guys that are shooting at you and melee the guys that are meleeing you. That's the entire flowchart of deciding what to do in combat. And it's really clear that Naughty Dog wanted combat to be more the focus than any sort of platforming. Like, the platforming is still there, but it is not going to be the mechanic that you rely on most to complete the game. That's the shooting. I should also note that by modern standards of how we treat checkpoints and autosaves, a lot of games from this PS2 era are really lacking. There's basically zero mid-mission checkpoints. So if you die at any point, you can expect to have to do the entire mission over every single time, no matter how far you get. And the difficulty spikes in this game are aplenty. Really, I think the only reasonable comparison to it would be Super Mario Sunshine, oddly enough. The weird way that levels like the Shadow Manta Ray or the Pachinko machine are just so much harder than anything else in Sunshine is the exact same stuff that happens in Jak II. Levels like the weird break-in where you have to run from an automated security system, or the aforementioned escort quest that I think takes place in the sewers, stand out so much in my memory just because they took forever to beat, not because they were good. As for the story itself, I really can't tell you much of what happened. Like, it's clear that there are these different factions. There's the existing authoritarian government, there's a mob boss, there's a resistance organization that you help out, and then there are also your friends from the first game, which I'm not going to spoil how exactly they get here. But outside of authoritarian government bad and illegal activity bad, I really can't tell you much more about any of these factions. They all just sort of ask you to do odd jobs that vaguely push their agenda forward, but don't have any real impact on anything outside of gating your progress to the next mission. Like, it might be the case that the mob boss asks you to get a MacGuffin, and then after you've retrieved that MacGuffin, the resistance is like, oh no, why did you do that? We have to take it back. But like, it doesn't advance some sort of overarching plot. Most of the actual story missions in this game feel like side content. It's strange. It's like everything's out of order. There's maybe 5 missions that feel like they're story crucial. Everything else feels like side content, and there's almost no actual side content to speak of. And so for hours and hours of my time with this game, it did not feel like I was doing anything actually important. But I was still forced to engage with all of this in order to actually get to the important stuff. Again, it feels like padding. Can I also just say that from a modern perspective, I just don't find the character of Daxter compelling? Like, I get it. It's very much an archetype of the early 2000s, this sort of smug but stupid character who doesn't see his own flaws. Like, this guy's literally some weird weasel thing and he's still trying to hit on attractive women, like there's any chance of success. And kind of, I guess, like Iago from Aladdin, he'll often just pawn things off on Jak II. I don't even know if that's a good comparison. It's kind of weird though, because Jak undergoes a pretty big change in his character, I guess, between Jak 1 and 2. Like, clearly the entire point with this dark Jak character is to add a darker, angrier side to Jak himself. And from what little that he actually does speak, I think you can see that in his character. Let's not mention that this was another trope of the early 2000s. We'll just ignore the fact that Sonic the Hedgehog was doing a similar thing by adding shadow around the turn of the millennium. Again, kind of just points to throwing in whatever's popular and it feeling kind of cash grabby. But it doesn't feel like Daxter's character has really changed at all from the first game to the second. He still just wants to become human again, and outside of that desire, just really doesn't seem to engage with his own diminutive stature at any point. Like, he'll actively cause more problems by being a hothead and running his mouth, or touching something he's not supposed to, rather than him actually really ever being helpful. Ultimately, what am I supposed to like about this character? That he talks too much? That he thinks more highly of himself than he should? He's not funny, at least by modern standards, and he actively makes Jak's mission harder. I would legitimately put Daxter alongside Navi or Fi from the Zelda franchise in terms of annoying sidekicks. I legitimately think the game would be better without him. And that's unfortunate to say, because at least in the first game, he was a titular character. And I don't feel this way about so many other supporting characters. For example, in Ratchet & Clank, a contemporary franchise to Jak and Daxter, Clank is surprisingly confident. There's actually sections where you get to play as him. He actually has meaningful things to say, and he's an actual aid to Ratchet's mission, not a hindrance. Or even in Sly Cooper, I can't remember the hippo guy's name, but he's played as just a stereotypical big dumb guy with muscle, but at least he still contributes in some way. He may say the occasional stupid thing or get the gang into trouble, but that's never his intent. It's always framed as like an accident. I don't know, clearly this is a trope that even continues to today. Like, I would probably say that Chris Pratt's character in the Jurassic World movies is basically like Daxter. He's overconfident, he's smug, and yet for whatever reason that's supposed to be endearing. Maybe that works for more mainstream audiences, but it just doesn't for me. I'm sorry. I do not relate to these characters. I just wish they weren't around. I should probably state for the record that I am a fan of Naughty Dog overall. I loved the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy. It's something that is a core part of my childhood. I love the Uncharted trilogy. I wouldn't go back and play the first one again now that I have, but they're nice. And then obviously The Last of Us is a major success in so many regards. What's really interesting is that in playing the entire catalog of this company, you can really see how they grew over time, how they were able to actually manage this transformation from side-scrolling platformer to third-person cover shooter with stealth and crafting elements. And you can see all of the minute changes that this team goes through, all of the things that they learn from game to game. Jak II is their first attempt at a shooter. They wouldn't get it right for 3 more games, presumably. I haven't played Jak III yet, but I have played Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. And once they did get the shooting right, then they could do things like add stealth mechanics, which play a larger part in Uncharted 3 than in either of the other 2 games in that trilogy, and they are in turn essential to The Last of Us. Jak II really strikes me as like the awkward teenage years for this company in terms of where they started versus where they've now ended up. And usually, these years aren't looked at too fondly, so I don't understand why Jak II has the praise that it does. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and claim that I have some definitive proof that this game was just shat out to make sure that the team had something going on that year, or that couple years. I obviously don't know enough about the internals of Naughty Dog to suggest anything like that. I'm not even familiar with how long it took to develop this game. Since it has an open world, I would assume in the early 2000s, that was a pretty significant development cost. However, the end result just really doesn't seem to justify it. Like, this is a game that has been part of my childhood. Jak II is the only game in this trilogy that I owned on the original PS2. This was a game I wanted to play as a kid, and I just could not stick with it. And it's only now, with so many other experiences under my belt, that I feel like I can at least try to describe why that was the case for young me. Regardless of the team's intentions, the overall package comes off as a cynical cash grab filled with padding. I see no synergy in the fact that this game is an open world, the fact that the vehicle controls are terrible, the fact that Dark Jak locks you out of all range fighting options. These don't feel like the moves of a team that wants to build a cohesive world and game. And to give them credit, you can tell that the people at Naughty Dog have learned a lot since these days. In something like The Last of Us Part 1, there's a very obvious intentionality behind all the systems at play. You are meant to engage with the crafting and stealth mechanics to make yourself less reliant on combat. Joel is intentionally not a combat expert, and so it is to your benefit to avoid combat where possible. Playing through and finally beating this game was such a frustrating endeavor in so many ways. I felt no connection to the story. It felt like the mechanics were fighting me at every turn, like my time was wasted between every single mission, and that the missions themselves just weren't executed that well. Like, if I had to say something good, I guess the racetracks were well designed, with hidden shortcuts. The game ran successfully on my PS3. I don't think it ever crashed. The music was generally inoffensive. I really don't remember any of it, which is really saying something because I can probably recall hundreds of video game songs, and I do not think I could do that with the Jak II soundtrack. I think the overall character design for Jak and Daxter is decent in terms of what they wear and how they look. It does a good job of establishing that this is a separate world from ours, but that's really as far as my praise goes with this game. Before I kind of wrap this up and get to my final score for the game, I just want to talk a little bit about my rating scale. I don't rate these games numerically by their technical achievements most of the time, unless something really stands out. Like, if this game had the best graphics for the time, I don't think I would give it a bunch of bonus points just for that. This isn't meant to be some objective score that covers the definitive quality of the finished product. My scores are merely a measure of whether I think anyone else should follow in my footsteps and play this game until the credits, or beyond. And most of the subtitles or labels for the different scores that I have are meant to indicate this. If I think a game has a lot of problems, but is still worth playing, that's something I can fit very easily onto my rating scale. If I think something's a masterpiece and everybody should play it, that has a place at the high end of the scale. And so with this in mind, my final rating for Jak II ended up being a 3 out of 10, which for me I have labeled as many glaring problems. I do not know why, unless you had some serious nostalgia for this franchise, anyone would ever want to go back and play this game to the credits. I think most people would get a couple hours in, maybe, and either get bored or frustrated. And to be clear, I hate that this is what I feel this game deserves. The entire reason the Jak and Daxter trilogy is in my backlog is because I felt like I did miss out on something by not playing these games as a kid. I only ever owned the second one, and even then I had barely played it. So I picked up the trilogy collection for PS3 and figured it would be something that I could experience as an adult. This mindset has worked really well for me with some other franchises, like Metal Gear Solid, Persona, and the larger Shin Megami Tensei franchise. Phoenix Wright? But Jak has been a huge disappointment. I will still be playing Jak III, number 3, not Roman numeral 3, at some point. I don't know when that'll be, but I will finish this franchise. I'm really hoping that the same sort of growth that I've seen in Naughty Dog from game to game, playing all of their previous games, I have some semblance of hope that Jak III will improve upon what Jak II did, and that I can finally see what people have actually enjoyed about this franchise. But for now, with just the first 2 games under my belt, I feel like if this wasn't from a well-known team, if this didn't have Sony's marketing behind it, if it was just some side company that had made a game like this unattached to any existing IP or dev team, that it would have flopped. And I really don't think that there would be so many people that look back on it fondly if it wasn't for these associations. And that's really unfortunate for me to say. I don't want to say these things about games. Everything that I put into my backlog is something that I think is either important to the history of games, or at the very least, I think I'll have fun with it. And this game really didn't give me any of that. For the history of Naughty Dog, it feels like a game that's better left forgotten compared to some of their other runaway successes that have pushed the entire medium forward. But I also guess in some ways, Jak II is a harbinger of what was to come for the video game industry. Companies chasing trends instead of having their own ideas, of adding this Grand Theft Auto open world just because it was popular, of shifting the entire genre of your franchise and the entire future of your company for this? As I said towards the top of this video, this is my lowest rated game from 2024 that I have beaten. Its strongest competition was Contra 3: The Alien Wars, and the only reason this game won out is because I had to deal with how bad it is for longer than 2 hours. Instead, Jak II chose to stretch its badness out over more than 20 hours, and there is very little of that time that I feel was actually worth it. So, there are my thoughts. I suppose the one benefit of having a channel as small as mine is that less people are going to be angry at this video. But if you still feel the need to write a mean comment, by all means do so. It still boosts engagement and is still a positive effect on the algorithm. I can take it. If this is one of your favorite games, or a game you look back on fondly from your childhood, I would truly love to know why. Not because I feel like mocking that decision, I just don't understand what it is that I'm missing here, and I would like to learn more. So yeah, we'll see when I get around to Jak III, and in the meantime, I'm not going to promise any specific video next. I'm trying to think of ways that I can really catch up on all the games that I've beaten in 2024, and so I may have some sort of compilation project up next. But until then, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.